Hello everyone and welcome to Marking the Role. This is Season 8 and this is the first episode of 2024. If you're new to Marking the Role is for teachers, or it started initially for teachers, but now it includes parents as well. Lots of information for those who are interested in education in Australia and anywhere really. Now there's some changes to the podcast from the start of this year. There'll only be 2 episodes per term. They'll be very irregular, 2 per term. And I've removed all the paywalls on Substack, so you can no longer subscribe to Marking the Role. Any donations are welcome, of course, but there'll only be 2 per term. And now why is that? Well, the hard reason is I had to get a job. That's right, the old cost of living got to me, and when I was 25 I traded in my teacher's first state super scheme to go overseas. Now, silly me. Nowadays I'd be quite well off, but my friends have a living wage of about $900 a week, and I'm on the age pension, which is a bit hard at these times. But no complaints, go back and do a bit of work. My partner Lee is also working pretty much full time, so there's only 2 episodes, and I'll try to make them as relevant to teachers and parents as possible. Now, last year towards the end we had our first episode on the neuroscience of learning. We looked at cognitive load theory, amongst some other things. But today this is going to be the second episode in that series, and we're going to be looking at the neuroscience of learning and exercise, and what exercise can do for your ability to learn. They don't teach this in teaching courses, and they should. I spent several years at the University of New South Wales in the School of Medical Science, and I was an educator there. And we did lots of work initially on the use of electroencephalographs, or EEGs, to show people what was happening inside their brain. And one of the most amazing things that scientists have discovered was that when someone does exercise, they grow new neurons inside their brain. What is a neuron? It's a tiny cell. You have about 100 billion of them in your head. And when we do exercise, we grow new ones. Now, we don't grow new ones around the outside, towards the outside of our brain, because they usually help us move and do other things. But we make the new neurons deep inside our brain, near something called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is the memory center of our brain. So every time we do some sweaty exercise, we make the new neurons, they go deep inside our brain near the hippocampus, and unbelievably, they help us to learn. And they help us to retain memories. Now, how have they researched this? Some of the main research has been done with nursing homes and people with dementia. So these people who can't remember who their children are, or don't know where they are, they can't do much exercise. But if they are capable of moving, they know how to dance, and they remember how to do some dancing. So the research in one of the studies, they got the dementia patients up to dance, put on some music from the 1950s maybe, got them up to dance, and got them tired, and they got tired and said, "Oh, I'm going to sit down now." No, bit more. So they got them quite exhausted, and then when they sat down, they taught them 3 things they wouldn't normally know. For example, something they wouldn't normally know, the capital of Texas is Austin. And then they'll say, "Okay, do you know a magpie only ever lays 3 eggs?" And they'll repeat each one of these facts 3 times, like a good teacher would do, making sure the person understood it. Now, 24 hours later, after they've learnt these new things, after exercise, they're asked what they learnt yesterday. And 80% of the time, these people can remember those 3 things precisely. Now, they may not know the exact thing, that it might be about the magpie and those eggs. Oh, how many was it? But they'll pretty much remember most of it. And then scientists put electroencephalographs on people who were on a treadmill. And to their amazement, they actually saw the neurons growing inside their brain. That process is called neurogenesis. So exercise and the ability to remember and learn go hand in hand. And it's something that teachers have forgotten. Now, I don't expect you to take my word on this. The expert has been a Dr. John Ratey, who around about 16 years ago now wrote a book called The Spark Project, or Spark. And he has been the #1 researcher in this specifically for schools. So I'll let him tell you about what he found.
I first learned about the power of exercise when I was doing my residency in psychiatry in Boston at the time of the Boston Marathon's explosion with Bill Rogers, and everybody in Boston was running. We began to see patients who had to stop running for the first time in their lives with an injury. First thing that happened, they got depressed. Then I began to see some people come in and say, look, I can no longer pay attention. I can no longer plan well. I'm procrastinating for the first time in my life. And these were professors from MIT and Harvard and industry leaders that had never experienced what we now call attention deficit disorder. But they were self-medicating with their daily exercise. And this changed and led me to be interested in exercise as a treatment for a lot of disorders. We knew that from the time of Hippocrates, that exercise was a good treatment for depression. And I began to say that a bout of exercise was like taking a little bit of Prozac and a little bit of Ritalin. But then I learned about this school in Naperville, Illinois, in 2003 that led me to write my book, Spark, which has given me the purpose and mission of changing our education system, bringing back play and exercise as a treatment modality or as a stimulant modality for all of our kids and all of us. Naperville had 19,000 students. And they had evolved over a 20-year period this wonderful PE program that was fitness-based, and it was every day. So the kids were spending 45 minutes, all of them moving and grooving. Well, what got them national recognition is that 3% of their children were overweight. And it was a time when 33% of our kids were overweight. In 7,500 children in the high school, there was not an obese child to be found. Remarkable. But what really got me on an airplane to go there was that some years before, they had taken the TIMSS test, the International Science and Math test, that every country takes every 3 years to rate and see how they're doing on science and math. And the U.S. is usually in the low to mid-teens. And they took it as a country, and they came in #1 in the world in science and #6 in math. So I jumped on an airplane, went there, and began to put together the science of exercise and its effect, not only for mental health issues, but for cognition. We began to take this idea to other schools. Went to an inner city school in Charleston, South Carolina, where they had no resources, one gymnasium, one PE teacher. She set up 8 different stations in the gym, had her 4th to 8th graders come in every morning for 30 minutes, play basketball, one station, double Dutch jump rope at another, pogo stick, hula hoops. They kept rotating, so the novelty was there. What they found in the first 4 months was a 83% drop in discipline problems. Now, it wasn't just burning off energy. What they were doing is they were turning their brains on. We worked with another school up in Northern Ontario, where the high school, where they had a special class for their 25 bad boys. They were very disruptive in a bad way, and one of the things that they had to do was to suspend these children if they were in fights and breaking furniture or just disrupting the class too much. So we went in and helped them design a program to get all these kids moving and moving vigorously in the morning. Semester before, they had 95 days of suspension of these children. After we started the program, it dropped to 5. Then, as well, the attendance went up. So these kids came to school, and these were rough kids, came to school to get their credits, to finish their courses, to participate in schools. Now, what happens when we exercise is we turn on our front part of the brain, the last part of the brain to evolve. This is a part of the brain that's called our CEO of the brain, or our prefrontal cortex, where our frontal executive functions are. And when we exercise, when we move, we turn that part of the brain on. As well, we create a lot of neurotransmitters that we aim at with our psychiatric drugs. And we create another substance that we had just learned about called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotropic factor, which I called Miracle Grow for the brain. Because when we fire our nerve cells, we make this stuff, and this keeps our brain cells young and perky. One of the reasons why exercise is one of the best ways to prevent the onset of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease, but it also readies our brain to be plastic. And we know we need to exercise, we know we need to have our brain cells grow to log in any new information. So exercise is a terrific way to improve the learner, because it turns on the attention system, it turns on the motivation system, it turns on the memory system, as well as it makes all of our little brain cells ready to grow and sprout. And that's the only way we learn anything. So the more fit the child is, the better learner they are. So my purpose, my mission is to go around the country and the world to tell people, look, exercise makes your brain better. It optimizes your brain's ability to learn. It helps with regulate your emotions. It improves your motivation, and it's something that we have unfortunately been taking out of our schools. We need to reinvigorate our schools and get our kids out of their seats and moving.
So that was Dr. John Ratey, who wrote Spark, the Revolutionary New Science of Exercise in the Brain, out with little brown books. Mind you, that voice grab from Ratey is 11 years old, and the term neurogenesis is only about 9 years old. So since he started doing this work, we've learnt a hell of a lot more about what exercise does for the brain and how you can actually see the neurons growing. Now, with this in mind, I thought we'd ask someone about how are the best ways to get kids into exercise, especially kids who might have lived through COVID and become addicted to their devices. Now, I live in a bit of a seaside village called 𝗧𝘗𝗏, and I walk the dogs in the morning in this park, which is fairly close to the beach, and often in the park there's this guy who's got groups of kids, and the kids are running around the park and they're doing exercise and they're racing one another, and they're obviously having a great time. And I thought I'd approach this guy and say, oh, what's going on? What are you doing? His name's Ben Couchman from 𝗧𝘗𝗏, and I began by asking him a fairly standard question with new guests. Ben, can you tell us a little bit about your background with physical fitness and exercise?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. It's fair to say I've had a lifetime involvement in rugby league. It's been my main passion, and everything I've done physical with fitness has kind of spurred off that as a hub. I started as a young boy at the age of 6 with my local club, 𝗧𝘗𝗏. I worked my way up the age groups and managed to get as far as the lower grades at the Illawarra Steelers. Some listeners will remember the Steelers. Yeah, it was my dream to make it in the professional ranks, but I fell a tiny bit short. I was never able to make a real living out of the sport. But I went back and played 9 years of first grade at my local club, 𝗧𝘄𝗶𝘁𝗶𝗿, and loved every minute of that.
So you've had a great history of physical fitness, but it really at a bit of an elite level, or a high level, and most kids at school won't aspire to that, I guess, although some will. We know the benefits of exercise on the brain, but from your teaching of physical fitness, what are some other benefits that you've seen taking place for young people?
Yeah, look, I see the firstly is positive self-esteem. They just develop some confidence in themselves, moving. I've coached a lot of junior sporting teams as well as I've delved in a lot of coaching clinics and things like that. So I've kind of covered both gamuts, both voluntary and in a commercial training kind of business. Universal with both those aspects is the positive self-esteem. With the team sports, you develop a sense of teamwork. I suppose, Phil, they get resilient. On a short-term basis, that might be getting through a tough part of a fitness session. A medium term could be overcoming setbacks, a selection or missing a trial in a team. And as parents, we can be conduits for those kids, helping put those setbacks into perspective and actually use them as learning and growth opportunities. So that's another benefit. They learn movement skills, they learn coordination. We know the obvious physical benefits. Movement in itself is a joyful state, and therefore it's nearly impossible to be simultaneously depressed while we're moving. So that in itself is probably one of the nicest benefits to be gained from physical activity.
It's interesting what you say about that, because the research is that depression and anxiety among school-age kids has really been on the increase. But that's gone hand in hand with the decrease in movement and sport at school. So I think you're right with that. And you did say that parents can be instrumental in this as far as resilience, getting kids over, doing a hard fitness centre session or not getting into a team. Do you talk about this with parents? Yeah,
I do. I'm always open to discussing things like that, and I'll draw on experience I've had, whether it's personally myself as a youth going through or as a parent of my own kids through their journeys. And it's really important. We're not just simply there to drop our kids offer a training session if they're in a team sport. We're there to help them contextualise the experience and put things in their proper perspective. It can't always be someone else's fault. We can't always be the victim, but at the same time, helping them to get perspective in good times and bad is really important. And sport plays a large role in that.
Yes, and to take responsibility for their own fitness, and I guess in a team environment to take responsibility for what they're doing for the team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, I know with COVID, there was a lot of young people who spent a lot of time in front of an iPad or an Xbox or their phone. How do you motivate young people who are addicted to devices? Have you had this problem? Is it possible to motivate them?
Yeah, I think it is. It's certainly a challenge we face, and it's a generation ago. What do we call it? The idiot box that was a television. Now it's gone next level, hasn't it? I suppose it can start with us as parents. If we're talking about parents, and setting an example. Taking on active pursuits ourselves, whether that's walking, running, weight training, anything like that. And if we lead with our actions, a lot of the time our kids they watch what we do more than what they listen to what we say, don't they?
They do. So what you're saying is that if your child is hooked on a device and doesn't want to get out and do some exercise, that it's best to start doing it yourself and set the example. Yeah,
that's right. And then when we look at the exercise itself, if you've got a lot of kids that just love really sport-minded kids, they'll love training and they love that kind of stuff. But here to the problem here, we're talking about unmotivated kids. We've got to make it fun. And sometimes we've got to be creative and whether we can indulge their passions and link that to exercise, like things like, if we've got a kid that loves animals and wildlife, let's take him for a bushwalk. Even sometimes thinking outside the square, and this is one that I have done before with one of my sons, and just gone and let's go down for a walk and down in the train station and count how many carriages on trains. And we just got to think outside the square, find ways to trick them into movement. And planning does help. The earlier in the day, the better. As an example, I've just ran some early morning holiday clinics a couple of times a week, and I locked in a time of 8:30, being the kids could get up, get moving in the morning, be finished by 9:30, and have the day to themselves. Just starting with small steps. As they start to gain some enjoyment, then you can lock in some more time exercising.
Now, earlier in this episode, I talked about the Spark program, which exists in the United States, and I know you're a little bit familiar with that. And parents have got to be on side for that Spark program because it involves the kids doing, as you suggested, morning exercise and doing it regularly, 5 days a week. Have you ever encountered resistance from parents to kids getting up at 6:30 and doing exercise? Have you seen resistance increase lately?
I think most of the people that come through, because it's a structured program and they're choosing to come, they've kind of already crossed that barrier. So I think, but it's a relationship of trust, and if they see that, anyone that knows me knows I don't do things by half, so parents will know that I'll do everything in my power to help their kid, and that's whether that's a kid that isn't much of a mover and it's developing self-esteem, or if it's on the if it's on the other end of the spectrum and trying to excel in a chosen sport. If there's a relationship there, whether it's a teacher or a coach, and there's a trust element, then those barriers can pretty much be removed. And I know as a parent, if I see my kid that's passionate or growing in an area and gaining confidence, then I'm happy to try to facilitate them doing that activity.
Now, Ben, we know that Australian schools probably won't undertake a program like the Spark program unless there's a dedicated set of teachers who will take responsibility, or community members in every community to take responsibility, because schools are under so much pressure. Is it important for whoever teaches the students or takes them for the physical fitness also does the exercise with them?
If there's already energy there from the kids, you might not need to. But sometimes 100%, Phil, 100%. Sometimes it's more than it's probably the best idea to get in and amongst it. If they can look at you as a teacher or a coach and see that you look relatively fit, and when you demonstrate one or two movements, you look athletic and competent, then that could be enough of a inspiration. It's funny, one of my oldest and fondest teachers was a guy called John Ireland at 𝗧𝘄𝗶𝘁𝗁𝗿 Primary School. He actually taught me in Year 3 and later in Year 5. And ironically, my wife and I were in the same class together in Year 5. He was still teaching at 𝗧𝘂 School up until 2 or 3 years ago. And I can still remember Mr. Ireland used to take us for morning laps of the school. So he was ahead of his time, really, when you talk about what they're doing with this Spark program in the States.
Yeah. Yeah, look, even when I went to school, I had teachers who would make us have a bit of a run or do some sweaty exercise in the morning, and I'm sure, yes, they didn't know about the Spark program then.
Yeah.
But we know now from that Spark program that raising sweat is important. Now, raising sweat, to listeners will say, oh, well, fast running or fast riding a bike, but it doesn't have to be that to raise a sweat.
No.
What sort of exercises does raise a bit of a sweat for the kids, but is not going to make them completely stuffed? Is there sorts of exercise that'll do that?
Yeah, Phil, there are, and you spoke to the fact of like variety and not doing the same thing every day as well, and so it's a bit of an art and not a science. Obviously, like sport is science based, but you want to provide some variety, and you also dovetail it with familiarity, so there's scope for progression. I like to use a little thing called the 3 Ps. Like, the first time I introduce an activity, prescribe it. The second time we do it, we progress further with it. And the third time, we try to perfect it. Not that you want to be perfect at it, but just that three times. And then usually that's enough for development. Then I like to move on to something else, because otherwise you're going to get stale and the boredom factor. But as far as activities, look, you can mix up all your principles. When you look at movement patterns, the basic is jumping, running, throwing, squatting. You can hinge, you can push or pull, and all those. The kids don't need to know what segment they're working in. That's just carefully planned in a macro sense, and then you just relax and enjoy the session. And like every teacher's always done, you probably spend 2 to 3 times the amount of time of the lesson in the planning.
Yep. So for listeners thinking, oh, geez, I wouldn't mind, helping start a Spark program in my community. I know in America they did 5 days, and each day was a different activity, although occasionally they repeated them. Stuff like Zumba classes was one of them. Walking on a treadmill was another one. Now, that's fairly boring, but if you can walk on a treadmill for 15, 20 minutes, you can raise a bit of a sweat. So it doesn't have to be the outside on the oval all the time. It can be gym-based some of the time, or even like a dance class some of the time too, as long as the kids are moving.
Yeah, that's right, 100%. And utilise what resources you've got, and go from there. You can be a little circuit or some body weight jumps and push-ups and things like that, getting up and down off the ground, and even funny things like wheelbarrow races. You do a wheelbarrow race, it's incredibly testing on your core strength and your push strength and stuff, and it's a heap of fun while you're doing it. So it's infinite, the amount of options if you're taking over, reaching, look, and providing the variety of different stimulus.
Now, I've seen both you and another guy in my local park at 7 a.m. During school time, during school weeks, with groups of kids. Now, I know that those kids are going to get pretty exhausted, and then they're going to probably go and have a bite of breakfast and then go to school. Now, some groups are huge. They're big groups. What age groups do you take, and what sort of commitment do you need from the parents and the kids? Like, the parents have got to stay there during that 40 minutes of exercise or something, do they?
We run programs for children from 6 to, say, 14 or 15. Our classes are mixtures of sprint training, endurance running. We do some gym strength classes at my studio gym. But as far as circling back to the group sessions there, Phil, the first commitment is just we engage the kids for a 10-week block, which runs concurrently with the school term. That way that gives everyone scope to get away for holidays, and also gives the kids a chance to deload and not be training every day, every week of the year. So commitment-wise, there's a commitment and upfront pay for the 10-week block. That helps us plan numbers, organise extra coaches, and it helps the kids as they develop consistency, improve performance, and it leads to enjoyment. But as far as I'm happy for the parents to go and do an errand, do their shopping, things like that. They're just aware that if we start at 7, we finish at 8, for instance, whatever that time may be, and that it's there to the pickup.
Yes, well, just going back on that Spark program, in America they found that the students in the schools that did the program had massive improvements in their academic achievement, their mood and their motivation, whereas the students in the other side of the country who didn't take part, the same number of schools, there was no increase and no change in student achievement. So the research is in on this, and I think schools, certainly in our local area of the Illawarra, but all over the country, should be saying, okay, why aren't we doing this? We're doing lots of other things that are good for them mentally or supposedly, but perhaps to change their anxiety and depression, we've got to get them moving.
I'd love the chance to be involved in establishing, assisting in the development of programs like this. I'd be all ears to any principals that wanted to chat about it. But connecting with schools, it's definitely an area that I want to explore. The idea of, tracking the mood of students and seeing if it has any effect on their academic performance is a very good one. And I've heard you mention that's a similar route that they take in the Spark program. So
if someone was interested in talking to you, Ben, about this, I'm going to put your details on the podcast, on the episode notes, so that they can contact you via email. And look, I know there's some parents thinking, I've got to go to work, I've got to leave work at 8 o'clock. So what times do the sessions start, or do you suggest they start and finish?
Currently, most of my programs outside of school hours, most of my junior stuff is in the afternoon. So I could definitely switch to a morning session, say, 6:45, that kind of thing.
Yeah, in other countries, 6:45 till 7:30 works pretty well, because then they go and have their breakfast. Now, just talking again for those listening, exercise produces new neurons in the brain near the hippocampus. That process is called neurogenesis. You might make a couple of thousand new neurons, and they're memory neurons. They don't help you move. So what your exercise programs do is create those new neurons, and then the kids go to school and they use those new neurons. So it makes sense, really, to do it in the mornings.
This podcast supports the Australian Declaration of Biological Truth. Anyone can sign the declaration to express their concern about transgender ideology in Australian schools, sports, business, and culture. In schools, kids as young as 5 are being told they can be born in the wrong body and they can change their sex. This is a biological impossibility. Men who identify as women can play in some women's sports. This is unfair and unsafe. It's free to sign, and you can sign privately so your name can't be seen. Hundreds of teachers and parents have already signed. Just search for Declaration of Biological Truth Australia. Thanks for listening.
Now, Ben, I know most parents listening and even young people listening, they don't want to be an elite athlete. But you have a history with your sons, I believe. There's a bit of a story with your sons and what they've managed to achieve.
Look, I've got twin boys, Ryan and Toby, and they just turned 20 a couple of months ago. But yeah, they've probably lived out their dreams and made NRL debuts with the 𝗧𝘄𝗶𝘁𝗶𝗿 Dragons. I suppose it's been a really big journey for us as a family, helping them through the highs and lows of that. But it's given me a little bit more of an overview on how to help kids coming through in the future. If whatever our kids are doing, if they're passionate about it, it'll lead to good things, and that's certainly something we encourage them from a young age.
And they're playing first grade. We've got listeners from Western Australia and Northern Territory, but so they'll be playing first grade, which is called the NRL, National Rugby League in Australia, for a team called 𝗧𝘄𝗶𝘁𝗁 Dragons. And when does that season start?
The season will start in early March. So they're preparing the trials period soon, and then finishing off their pre-season with their squad. And so that's it. They're loving what they're doing. They're in a really good network and living the life of a professional athlete. And any young kids or parents listening, they weren't the kids that were on high on the radar at 15, and they actually missed a heap of teams. They missed a lot of teams. Sometimes because they didn't deserve to make it, and if that was the case, I told them, I would tell them that. But whether it's right or wrong, the next course of action is always keep working hard, whether you've had success or failure. The recipe is just progression and hard work. But it's just a nice example for other youngsters in the area that, diligence and hard work can help us if it's our true passion. And as a parent, I saw it was my duty to encourage them and be real with them along the way. But one thing we did always say was, you're not going to make it if you don't have a red hot crack, but there is no failure at the end of this. Enjoy the process, work really hard, and if you do fall short, the traits you learn along the way, the confidence, self-belief, are going to serve you well in life in general. So it's not about the journey goes in all different ways, but enjoy the process more than worry about the result.
Yep. And even if you're not aiming to be a first grade player or an elite athlete, your heart will be better and your brain will be better. And that was Ben Couchman, quite a personality in the Thirroul area. If you want to get in contact with Ben, all of his details are on the episode notes. So when you go into Spotify or Apple, you can click on the actual episode, and there's a whole lot of notes there, and email addresses and things like that. Well, my name is Phil Dye. You've been listening to Marking the Role. This is Season 8, and there's only going to be 2 episodes in this season, as I explained before. If you're a teacher, have a good term. If you're a parent, have a good term. And I'll see you again soon.